Okay, so what I've tried to do is take a lot of the questions that I get asked from homeowners and kind of put them into the information that we teach in the Master Gardener class and try to put it in a flow chart type system in that we talk about some of the, what is cross-pollination, purchasing fruit trees to where finally at the end we've got our trees planted and we're harvesting fruit and that off of them, okay? So it might be that if you ask a question, I encourage class participation in that, but it might be that I'll say, hey, just hang on to that question, we're going to cover that in a couple of slides, or we're going to cover that in half an hour, okay? So, when we talk about fruit production and we talk with homeowners, a lot of them get excited either right at the beginning, this time of the year we're starting to get some 60-degree temperatures outside and it's nice and warm and we start getting that bug to get outside. And then the other thing that happens is when we start getting to the farmers markets and the fresh fruit starts coming on there that we really get excited about fruit production. As Mike mentioned, I do work a lot with the commercial fruit growers up in my area, plus I do a lot of the homeowners, talk with homeowners in that as well as the trainings in that. And there's nothing better than walking out back after a hard day of work and going to one of your trees and you're picking your cherries or you're picking your peach or your apple and you get to eat some of that fresh fruit that's come from your hard work and labor in that with it. So it's really a cool thing. And so hopefully by the time we get through tonight, I haven't discouraged you, that I've given you some good ideas of things to try or to tweak in your own things, because fruit production is an accomplishment and it's one of those fun things to do, okay? So when we talk, and this is probably, we look about where we're going to plant our fruit trees and that in our yard. Probably there's not a thing here that you haven't seen in some of the other lectures. You want good drained soils. If you've got heavy clay soils in that, you're probably going to need to do something to kind of amend those to make them to where you've got a site that's acceptable for fruit production. They like good drainage, and so good drainage, okay, with fruit. This is actually a picture up in Box Elder County. And the trees, if you've driven through there between Brigham City and Willard, you'll notice that almost all of those trees are on the benches there. Probably some of the rockiest ground in Box Elder County. And that's because it's good drainage, and we also allows, as we get talking about frost protection, and that allows for that cold air movement to flow down off of the mountain, down through the canyons, and flow out over the lake there in the area, okay? Some of the other things that you want with fruit production, you want to make sure that they're getting as much sun as possible, because that sunlight is going to ripen, it's going to grow the fruit, and it's going to ripen our fruit. And so think of those trees as solar collectors, and so the more sunlight we can expose them to, the better production we're going to have out of them. And then we can also, put the trees in the right spacing that we need to right there. So, that's in your book. I don't want to spend a lot of time with it because there's a lot of other things we'd like to cover tonight. So any kind of questions about where we want to plant our fruit trees in our home? Okay. Okay. What are some of the problems that you guys that are maybe experienced or you've read about? What are some of those problems that you guys have growing fruit in your lawn? Deer, okay. Insects that are going to get into the fruit and that. What else?
Winter sun damage.
Okay, winter injury, birds, okay, frost, early spring frosts, okay. Anything else?
Small fruit.
Okay, smaller fruit. And so this is kind of a short list here. We've got a length of growing season. Maybe some of us have about 80-day growing season. Maybe some of us are up 200 days. Maybe some of us are shorter than that. And so that depends upon and dictates kind of what we can grow. Anybody recognize this plant? Banana. None of us are growing bananas here because we don't have a long enough growing season. We don't have the conditions right for that. Somebody mentioned winter temperatures. How cold do we get in through the Utah County in the wintertime? Minus 10, maybe as cool as it's been this last winter. What's kind of our all-time lows? Maybe it was minus 20 sometimes in that. So we have to take that into consideration when we're growing trees, because the last thing we want to do is have this tree that we spent the last 10, 15 years training and growing, and it's just into really nice full production, and then it winter kills on us. The whole tree dies. and we get to start all over again with it, okay? Summer heat. How is that going to affect us? I thought, we like the heat and, we enjoy the summer. Maybe we get some sun scalding and that happens on our fruit if our trees are a little more open. Sometimes if we prune them a lot, too heavy all at once, we can open the tree up and expose our trunks and our scaffolding branches to sun scalding and that issues. Anybody here like a Honeycrisp apple? Anybody have one that they have had it in for several years and have production off of it?
I've got 25 of them.
You've got 25 of them?
That's all that was available.
Okay. Okay. I don't know if you have this experience, but what I see with my Honeycrisp apple is that when we start getting those 100-degree temperatures for a couple, 3 weeks, my fruit will crack right by the stem. Of course, if we're eating those fresh, probably not big of a problem. If we're taking them to market, they might frown on a little bit. But if we're trying to put them into storage and keep them for any amount of time, that's going to open it up to bacteria and other things, and they're just not going to keep as well for us. And so that's a heat issue there with some of them. What happens if we're trying to market, maybe we've planted a bunch of fruit trees and we're trying to go to a farmer's market or something like that with it, and all of a sudden all of our fruit comes on all at once. And we were hoping to have peaches for the next 4 weeks, and they're all coming on within a 2-week period. So that can be a slight problem for us. Wind. You guys probably don't have a problem with wind down here, right? Nah, none of us, right? There's nothing more disheartening than when you have, the fruit, it's ready to harvest. Well, I'll back up. You've got little fruit on the tree, or maybe you've got blossoms out there, and all of a sudden here comes the wind through and takes off a lot of the petioles and stuff off of the trees, or the little fruit off. But it's even worse when you've got fruit you're ready to harvest, and you go out there and get the wind and it's dropping like grapefruits on the ground, okay? Because you've put all that time and effort into them and you lose them that way. Late spring frosts and our soils. Soil's probably not a problem because we all have good soils and they're not rocky. We don't have a problem with hard clay pans, things like that, okay? And so if we have some of these things, hopefully by the time we get through, you can say, yeah, I can do this. I can amend my soil. I can put it in an area where I can protect it a little bit more for the wind. I can do some of these things to make it so that I do have fruit on my trees. Okay? So questions at this point? Yes?
Do fruit trees go through, like 1 year they'll be more bountiful than another? Because I have an apricot tree where there's some years we get hardly anything, and some years we have thousands.
Yeah, and we'll answer that question here when we get to that point, and if we don't, make sure we do, but we should answer that, okay? So, let's move on then. If we're talking about fruit trees and fruit production, why would I throw up a USDA hardiness map? How is that important to us?
Well, you're not planting orange trees.
Yeah, it tells us, don't plant orange, don't plant the banana trees here, for one thing. This is one that is kind of interesting because you can actually go up here and put in your zip code, and it will tell you what zone you're in. This is a Brigham City zip code. It tells me that Brigham City is a zone 6B, and my temperatures are going to get down to somewhere between -5 and 0 degrees. Now, I know that from the weather stations this last year, we got down to a -9. Not too much of a concern there, but I do know that 2 weeks ago I taught it out in Tooele, and it said that Tooele County was a zone 7. Is that right? No, okay. So even though this is, an educational website, now we have to be careful about using this information. It should be fairly accurate, but should. Sometimes it is wrong. So just use it as some good information and plan around that. Yes.
Some parts of Tooele County down by the lake warmer.
Yeah, but I would be hesitant about putting in zone 7 type material in there. Let me give you an example. I know, like I said, 5, 6, I have some growers that have put in some zone 7 peaches, and most of the time we're okay. But every once in a while when we start getting those cooler temperatures like that, they'll see more injury on the growth or to the buds, or they'll see more injury onto major branches and that. We've seen trees that were basically wiped out because we pushed that just a little bit, and Mother Nature taught us a good lesson. Okay. Okay, so just use it for that. And if you look at this chart right here, you can see that these are the most common fruit trees that we have here in Utah. And according to, if you're a zone 5, 6, we can grow everything on this list. Okay? But notice there's no oranges, bananas, or grapefruits or things like that. Okay, the citruses, save that for the greenhouse class. Okay. Anybody growing pluots or apriums or know what they are? Okay, so some of you guys do, and so a lot of times I throw that up, and a lot of people say, "What's that?" They're just.
What's the difference between a pluot and apricot?
The pluot, it depends upon. One of them has more of the plum than the apricot, and then this one here is heavier in the aprium than the plum, as far as the genetics of it, the material.
What zone would quince grow?
Oh, I don't know. That's your assignment for next week, okay, is to report to the class. Okay? We just don't do a lot with quince and that here, so I don't know. Okay. When we talk about, blooming, because right now, if you go outside, anybody here have an apricot tree? A couple of you do? What do your apricot trees look like as far as the buds? Yeah, they're making you nervous, huh? And this is not as fresh as it was 2 days ago, but you can see the buds have really pushed, the blossoms are close. If we keep this 60-degree temperatures, we're easily going to have probably frozen apricots, okay? Typically, we're not going to see this much development on those trees in a normal year, I would say, for at least another 3 to 4 weeks. We're really early on some of this stuff, okay?
Not the first of April.
But what my growers will tell me, this is the sacrificial lamb. Take the apricots, leave the peaches and some of the other fruit, okay? And so, apricots, how many years would you guys estimate out of 10 that you get an apricot or apricot crop on your trees? 5? Maybe 5 out of 10? You're probably good?
We got it every year.
Okay, it depends upon, because some of you are in different locations, it also can depend upon some of the varieties that you have. Because if we have, within each of these categories right here, we might have an early blooming variety, we might have some late blooming stuff. And as we go down through here, somebody might say, you know what, I've got a peach and my apples will bloom before my peaches. And that can happen because there's, hundreds of varieties of apples. There's probably 40 different varieties of peaches that we have, and so they will be in, some late blooming peaches and early blooming apples that would overlap that. But that's just kind of an order as to when they would bloom. And so I usually tell people, they say, you know what, gosh, if you had to give me one recommendation to grow a fruit that I can have success with or kind of cut my teeth on and then I might move into something else, what would it be? And I will usually tell them, apples and pears to me seem like they're a little bit easier to grow than an apricot. If I am going to put a tree in and I want fruit off of it, I want fruit every year and not every other year with it, okay? And so I would say apples and pears. Start with those, okay? Questions kind of about bloom and that? Yes?
Would you recommend any kind of late blooming apricot?
I've got some of those when we talk about varieties here in a bit, okay? So I'll point some of those out. So some of you just say, oh man, I've just got to have an apricot tree. What's a variety that you can plant? And we'll show those when we talk about some varieties, okay? Okay, your book has a term in there. Maybe some of you have seen it, on some of the labels and that, but it says this tree needs cross-pollination. And we're talking apples right here. Apples need cross-pollination. What does that mean? I need 2 different trees. So if I have a pear tree and an apple tree, I've got cross-pollination. No.
Different varieties.
Okay, so if I have 2 red delicious apples and 2 red delicious apples, I've got cross-pollination. No. Okay. Good. Great, we got that point. Okay, so let's, on this chart right here, Everybody recognize Honeycrisp? That's a really good apple. So let's say we've got a Honeycrisp apple tree and we have a Fuji apple tree. And we go right here and notice that it's a tan square. Anything on this chart that is a tan square means that it will cross-pollinate. Those two trees will cross-pollinate each other, okay? Yes?
What about ladybugs?
Okay, if it's not on the chart, Google it. Okay, Google pink lady cross-pollination chart and pull it up, okay? I pulled this chart in because it has some problems that I wanted to look at. So, if it's tan, we should be good. So, let's look at Fuji then and Jonagold. And notice that we've got an apple there with a hash mark through it. It says not a satisfactory pollinator. That Jonagold tree, the pollen from it is sterile. Okay? And notice that the crispin, or the matsu, and the wine sap pollen is also sterile. So, let me give you a situation. I have the Fuji, I have a Jonagold tree, I live 5 miles from my nearest neighbor. Will I have fruit?
On which tree?
That wasn't my question. My question was, will I have fruit? How many thinks yes? Raise your hands. Okay, how many of you guys say no? Raise your hands. How many of you guys are not playing the game? Okay. Okay, somebody that said yes. Why would we, okay. Why would we have, which tree would we have fruit on?
It was Jonagold and what? Fuji?
Jonagold and the Fuji.
I would say the Fuji.
Who said Jonagold? Did you say Jonagold? Why did you say Jonagold?
Obviously doesn't need pollination.
No. What it is, remember I said that the Fuji has good pollen. And so it will pollinate the Jonagold tree, but the pollen from the Jonagold is sterile, and so the Fuji tree will not have fruit on it. But if I go out there and I look at the tree, I'm going to say that doggone Fuji tree is a bad tree because it doesn't have fruit on it. It flowers and everything, but I ever get any fruit on it. But this is the one that's giving me the problem. Okay? So, what if I take the Jonagold, the Crispin, and the wine sap? I have those 3 trees. And I'm at 5 miles away from my nearest neighbor. Would I have fruit? No. My trees would grow, they're pretty, they have flowers and stuff. I never have any fruit set on them. Okay? Now, if I have those 3 trees plus the Fuji, where do I have fruit? All of the other 3, but the Fuji I have no fruit on, okay? Questions? Yes.
Why do they need other pollen? Why can't they just use their own? Not the sterile ones, but the other ones. Why can't they just pollinate themselves?
Okay, and that's another term that we come up on when we talk about peaches and that. So just hang on to that one. So let's finish up with this cross-pollination discussion right here. So the other thing that your book talks about is they need to be blooming at the same time. Because remember I said that there's a couple of hundred varieties of apples out there. Not all of them are going to bloom come into bloom at the same time. And so if we had something like this Ida Red apple and, oops, wrong button, and the Rome Beauty apple here at the bottom of the chart. Okay, what's a problem that we might have there?
They've only got like...
Yeah, the Ida Red is kind of on the last tail end of its bloom cycle, where the Rome Beauty might be on the first part of its cycle. And so they may not overlap enough to where they would provide cross-pollination for each other. That button. Okay, but let me show you. So if you've ever looked at blooms when they open up in that cluster, what you'll see is that you have what's called the king bloom or the primary bloom that'll open up. And then, a day or two later, you'll have some secondary blooms that'll open up. And that tree will kind of bloom over 5-7 day time period to where eventually the tree is in what we call a full bloom when all the blossoms are open. Why would that tree, why do that? Why don't we just have them and pop out, and we've got all the blooms open, and 2 days later they're pollinated and we're done. It's that concept, because you know what? If we have frost that comes in, that bloom right there is much more susceptible to that frost damage than that and that one right there. Okay? And we'll carry that conversation a little bit more. So that's what we're talking about is that, you know, this Eider Red is on those last blooms opening, and we probably missed these earlier ones, and the Rome Beauty is just starting with those first ones to pop open. What we'd really like to see is something, you know, that's blooming at the same time. Is that critical? It might be something to kind of watch. But I wouldn't plan my whole orchard around, okay, I got to have 2 of these trees blooming, 2 of these trees, 2 of these trees, 2 of these trees. Okay, just realize that you got early blooming stuff and late blooming stuff. Yes?
Let's say that you got 2 or 3 different types of apple trees blooming at the same time. And then here comes a little bee, and it comes in and gets pollen all over, and then it goes to that one. How does the plant know which pollen to take in, or does it?
Doesn't matter.
The first one that takes it, or what?
Doesn't really matter. He's going to get that pollen grains all over it, and so within that, he's probably going to have multiple. You know, when he lights on that female end that's sticking out there, there's going to be multiple grains that are going to be on it.
But how does the flower know which pollen to take in?
Doesn't matter. Just going to take it all in. I mean, I don't know if Mike could probably tell you in genetics, and they probably study that in more detail. For our case here, no, we don't really. Doesn't really matter.
Several of them that actually germinate down through the style.
The style,
but
Sigma style, and
the one
Sigma.
that gets there
Is fertilizing it.
fertilize the egg. So it doesn't matter if there's 10 chasing it. As soon as that egg's fertilized, it's shut off.
Yeah. Okay. Question here.
So you mentioned about when you talk about 5 miles away. What about your neighbor tree? How close can you be to a tree that's fallen?
Okay. Anybody here do bees? A couple of you do. Okay. How far will a honeybee fly? I've had some people say up to 5 miles. But are they going to fly that day in and day out? No. Most people say 2 miles is kind of the max. Okay, what happens if it's a cold, wet, rainy day? They're going to stick right in the hive. They're not going to be out pollinating, okay? So I tell people, if you're in a subdivision and your neighbors have got, another apple tree or the other thing, crab apples, okay, your ornamental trees and that provide a pollen source for us. In fact, in big orchards and that, they will actually plant pollinator trees in the orchard just as a pollen source that are right in that block of trees for that reason. Okay?
Is that only fruiting crab apples?
That's only crab apples. Remember, we're talking apples to apples. So your ornamental pears, flowering pears, okay, those will work as pollinators for your European pear varieties and that. Okay, so it's apples to apples, pears to pears, oranges to oranges. Okay? Yes.
In our yard, if we like to plant trees that will bloom at different times so we have produce throughout the season, how do you recommend doing that so that they still overlap enough pollinate?
That's what I'm going to show you so that you can kind of look at some of this and say, okay, you know what, if I want, X, Y, and Z variety of apple or other tree that needs cross-pollination, you can plan that out so that it happens. And there again, it might be, I've had people say, if I'm the only one that has an apple tree, can I drive down to my neighbor that has a crab apple tree or an apple tree in their yard and take a branch off of it and bring it back and stick it next to my tree? More power to you, okay? If you think you need that, okay? But what I'm trying to do is get you guys to think is like, okay, why did that tree not produce fruit? Or is it going to produce fruit? Because the last thing you want to do is put in these trees and you work hard all year long and you don't get any fruit off of them. Okay? So what you kind of want to do is look at it and say, okay, these 2 trees are blooming at the same time, so they should be good that way. I look at a chart like this, and I see that, yeah, they're going to cross-pollinate each other, and I put them together, and it works for me. But I don't, as I mentioned, I chose this chart right here because it has some things in here. Now look at something like a Arkansas black. It works on most everything but a lodi. So if you wanted to have a lodi in an Arkansas black, that's going to be a problem. But if I've got an Arkansas black in any of these other ones, it's not a problem. Okay? So don't stress over it. Okay? I'm just trying to teach bloom time, cross-pollination, and how it works for you. Okay? And so the question was asked, what about Pink Lady? What about Macintosh? What about Jonagold? Yeah. And so just Google it. Google Macintosh or just another apple pollination chart and pull it up and look at them. Okay? Here's a summary chart, and you can see right here I say apples need cross-pollination, and European pears, and Asian pears, and Japanese plums, and most of our European plums need cross-pollinating. Sweet cherries, most of them do. And then we come over here to peaches and nectarines, and it says that they're self-fruitful. What does that mean? It means I can take one tree and move 5 miles from town and neighbors, and I can have fruit on it. It only takes one tree to have fruit on it. And so you can see peaches and nectarines are self-fruitful. If I get down here to apricots, I have some of my apricots that need cross-pollinating. Most of them are self-fruitful. So if you want an apricot tree, I would select one that is self-fruitful so that I don't have to have 2 of them. Okay? Tart cherries, self-fruitful, and you can see some of the other ones. So it's really kind of important that you do some of the homework, because otherwise if you go to the nursery and it's not on the tag or you're not familiar with it, how do you know what you're getting and what you need? Okay? Question?
What if it's one tree, like right now at Costco they have like a cherry tree that has 3 kinds of cherries on it, grafted?
Okay. So what's the idea behind that? The idea behind that is that, okay, we know that if we look at our chart right here, sweet cherries, they need cross-pollinating. So they've grafted 2 or 3 varieties onto one tree so that hopefully they're going to what? Cross-pollinate each other and bloom at the same time. So then I only have to have one tree and I've got 3 or 4 different cherries on it. Anybody have one of those trees or had one for 10, 12 years? Anybody with an older one? Okay. The idea and the concept is great, but what I see and hear from homeowners, they'll say is that over time you might find that one of those varieties is a little more vigorous than the other, and so you'll have to prune it back a little harder to keep the shape. Sometimes you might get one that maybe it's a zone 7 and the other things are zone 6s, and so you might see some winter injury or complete limb dieback on that tree. My father-in-law had a sweet cherry that was a 3-in-1, and since it was a major scaffolding branch, it just busted right out of the tree. And so then he had this big gap in the one side of the tree, and he couldn't stand it, so he cut it out. But the idea is nice because most of us don't have ½ acre, 3/4 of an acre of land to put a dozen fruit trees on. So I can buy one tree, cherry tree, and I have cherries, and hopefully at different times, they're ripening over a couple of week period. Okay? Is there anything wrong with that? No. Yeah. Yeah. Yep, it does. Okay? Other questions? Yes.
Dwarf trees, are those a good one to get for home?
Okay, let's talk about dwarfs here. It's not next, but here in just a minute we'll talk, okay? We'll explain the different concepts. So, here's a chart for pears. Here's one for cherries. Okay? If you've got something that you're looking at, go find a chart and make sure it's going to work for you. Okay, then another concept that's in your book that it talks about is chill units. Anybody read the chapter and can paraphrase what a chill unit is? Or maybe you don't have to read the chapter and you know it, and you tell me what a chill unit is. And why are we concerned with chill units in fruit? Okay. If you look at this website, now with the advent of the internet, it's a great tool to find some good examples that we can use in this. Because this says it's a low chill peach, and this gold peach right here says 20 chill units, or excuse me, 200 chill units. What? So what? Okay. What a chill unit is fruit needs chill units, and they start accumulating those. It's temperatures that they need, that they'll accumulate those in the fall time of the year, clear until the springtime of the year. And they have to have those, otherwise they won't produce a bud or fruit for me. And so if that is not met, I just have a shade tree. So if this one says that it's 200 chill units, and we typically will get here in Utah somewhere between 800 and 1,200 chill units in that time frame, where would this tree be marketed for? Someplace warmer. Georgia, Florida, California, Texas. Okay? So, because of the internet now, anybody here lived in maybe a southern state or warmer, where they grow peaches? Where did you live?
Florida.
Florida. Okay? So let's say, for example, you were in Florida and this was your favorite peach, and you decide to move back here to Utah, and the last thing you did is the U-Haul drove out, you went to the nursery and you picked up one of these trees. And we bring it here, we plant it. What's going to happen to that tree?
It's not going to like the winter.
Okay, it's not going to like the winter. What zone is probably where that tree came from? Probably 8 or 9. Okay, so that tree will winter kill for us. Okay, now let's do the reverse. Let's say, for example, we live here in Utah. What's the favorite peach that everybody likes in Utah? Alberta's, early Alberta's. Okay, that peach probably needs somewhere between 600 and 800 chill units. So I move into Georgia. Last stop, I grab the peach tree and I go to Georgia. What will happen to that tree in Georgia? Will it survive? Yes. Will it have fruit on it? No, because they're not going to get enough of those chill units for it to produce the fruit. Okay? Again, don't get hung up on it. Let me just show you. And this is, for apples, this is kind of how it accumulates those chill units. You can see between 35 and 36 degrees Fahrenheit, I'm going to get a half a chill unit. Between 37 and 48, I'm going to get 1 chill unit. And 40. So if it's 32 degrees and 20 degrees in that, I'm not acquiring chill units. It's kind of those more mild temperatures that helps me accumulate those. Okay? And this is for apples, and peaches are going to be a little bit different. Each of the fruits are going to be a little bit different as to how many they need and how quickly it acquires those. But like I said, don't get hung up on that. The reason why I showed you that is because, again, look at, here's an Empire apple. It says it needs 800 hours. Am I okay growing that here?
Yeah.
Probably. How about Fuji? 600. So most of those we're going to be okay here. But if I was in Georgia, okay, are we going to be okay growing those varieties there? Probably not. So I'm going to have to take some different ones. Okay? Questions then about chill units? Like I said, it's one of the terms that's in your book. Just kind of be familiar with it, because you might see it on some of the tags or or on the internet. Okay? Okay. So the next question I get a lot of times is, how big? I go to the nursery and it says, this is going to be a standard tree. How big is that tree going to get? It depends. Okay? This is a standard size sweet cherry. That tree is probably about 50 feet in diameter. That's a Chevy Cavalier car next to it. Okay? That's how big it is. Okay? I remember cherries need cross-pollinating. So if I want that tree, I've got to have 2 of those trees. So that means in this room we would have 2 cherry trees. How many of you have enough room to put 2 cherry trees? Okay, some of you yes, others saying, no way. Okay, so what they do is we will graft those cherries or those peaches or those pears or apples or whatever onto different rootstocks. And that rootstock is going to depend upon how big the tree will get. And it just kind of shows you right here, you know, what it's going to be. Let me skip that. So one of the things that we do is we graft. And as Mike Karen mentioned, I teach a grafting class, and I invite you to come out to our grafting class. Grafting, what we do is we take, you know, a rootstock, we take what we call a scion piece of that fruiting cultivar. We put those 2, make some cuts on them, put them together, and if we do it just right, they grow. And almost every fruit tree that we're going to purchase in a nursery has been either grafted or budded, believe it or not. Okay. From that, this top piece right here, so that's going to be our like the Gala or the Kami or the Fuji or the Honeycrisp apple right here. This is what we call the graft union. And from that rootstock is going to be the size of the tree. We might also get some disease resistance with that rootstock that can help us out. Okay? And so that's why we do some of the grafting.